So welcome to this first e-assessment question conference, pre-conference insight session. I'm really delighted to have David McVeigh from Pearson UK with us today to talk about a large-scale national adoption of e-assessment within Egypt. It's a project that I've been finding really fascinating, learning more about over the last few months, and I'm really looking forward to David's presentation to bring us bang up to date with what's been going on in Egypt. David, welcome. Thanks very much for finding the time to join us.
Thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity to talk to colleagues in the community, and I look forward to seeing any questions or hearing any views that colleagues may have in due course.
Wonderful. All right, well then without further ado, let's pass over control to you so that you can share your presentation with us.
Thank you for the introduction, Matt, and it's great to have the chance to talk to colleagues about the experience. So I'm David McVeigh. I'm the head of assessment design at Pearson UK, and I'm going to be spending a short time during the recording talking to you about a project that I've been involved in, which is the transitioning of high stakes summative assessments from paper and pen to an online mode of delivery. That mode of delivery is via remote device, via tablets. And what I want to do is to talk to you about the challenges that we've had in doing that and working with local partners. The project team is a small team that's been drawn from across Pearson. The project's been led by colleagues in Pearson, Australia, and the assessment design team, and also the technical and statistical intelligence team in the UK have contributed to the project. We've also worked closely with York Press and very, very closely collaborated with the Ministry of Education within Egypt. The final partner has been the National Centre for Examinations and Educational Evaluation, who I'll refer to from this point forward as the NCEEE, and they are in effect the National Exam Board within Egypt. So a bit of background about the project. It's being driven by the Minister of Education, Dr. Tariq, and he wants to drive the digital transformation of teaching and learning in Egypt. It's part of a broader programme of reform within the country, which is looking to drive social transformation, and it's seen that educational reform is a vital part of achieving that goal. The government of Egypt have secured a $500 million loan from the World Bank in order to fund the educational reform, and it's looking to reform the curriculum at all levels and in all subjects, but Pearson are involved in the transformation of just a few of those levels or grades, to use the local parlance, and I'll go on to that in a bit more detail shortly. Dr. Tariq wants to improve educational learning outcomes for students and improve student engagement. We'll come on to some detail which sets out some of the challenges that the Egyptian government is facing around participation in particular grades, and I will hopefully explain why that is the case. As part of the transformation, there has been the creation of a digital platform known as Egyptian Knowledge Bank. This is a digital library of electronic assets. It includes titles such as Encyclopedia Britannica and York Notes, and this is a resource that is available to students throughout their learning and also during their summative assessment. It's an open book assessment. A bit of context about Egypt's current education system. Pearson are focusing on grades 10, 11, 12, so the senior secondary education stage, in terms of the transition from a paper-based to on-screen assessment experience. And the whole stage is known as Thanawaya Amma locally. Subjects are taken through grades 10 to 12, and currently each subject has a single test at the end of grade 12, which is aggregated, and it's that aggregated score that will dictate whether a student will proceed to university or not. In terms of the transition or the developmental project, what we are doing is supporting the Egyptian government from moving from a single exam at the end of grade 12 to a modular or phased approach whereby each grade is separated into 2 terms. There is a test taken at the end of each term within each subject, and so there will be test experiences through grades 10, 11 and 12, which will be aggregated and then will become the result upon which university entrance is decided upon. So I wanted to give some context around issues that the reform is intending to address. One of the main pieces is around participation. Currently, it's only the test results from the assessments in grade 12 that will decide upon a student going to university or not. That means that in grades 10 and 11, there is a significant dropout rate. Candidates will know that they only have to achieve success in the grade 12 exam, and therefore sometimes don't attend school within grades 10 and 11. Some candidates do return in order to sit the assessment at the end of grade 12, but often it's the case that candidates will drop out of grade 10 and won't return to the secondary school environment. Obviously, part of the Egyptian government's vision is to ensure that through changing the assessment regime and changing the contribution of tests within grades 10 and 11 to contribute to the overall result, they're trying to increase participation. If they can increase participation of students of that age through grades 10 and 11 and 12, they expect the link to GDP to be seen, so it will have a very positive impact on the overall GDP of the country, just through the level of education that students are receiving. For them, it's about the quality of education and not less the quantity. Okay, next, Thanawaya Amma. So I've spoken about the assessment at the end of the grade 12, and one of the main issues with the current assessment approach is that it rewards memorization skills only. So students know that if they can remember the content of a single text via rote learning, then the likelihood of success in that exam is high. Therefore, the assessment's ability to differentiate currently is not, as all of us would expect, a high stakes assessment to be. It's not currently as valid as it could be an instrument in differentiating across levels of ability. Now, this of course has implications for higher education and university entrance, because it does mean that candidates with a better memory are securing university places. That sometimes means that candidates who progress to university will struggle with the academic challenges that the undergraduate courses set, leading to dropouts. And it also means that university places are oversubscribed because there are so many candidates achieving success in the current assessment regime. Further to that, the current paper-based delivery model is huge in terms of its costs. The logistical operations required to circulate versions of papers across a country as vast as Egypt are astronomical, and there are security risks around the use of social media in circulating content from paper materials. Now, it must be said that the last issue is not by any means restricted to Egypt as a jurisdiction. I'm sure many of us can relate to that, but it's seen as something where the transition to on-screen assessment will improve the security around the assessment offering. It's by no means a silver bullet. It raises other risks, but it is seen as a method by which security can be improved and costs can be lowered after an initial outlay. The final issue is around private tutoring. What has emerged in Egypt is an unregulated shadow economy worth 111 million euros annually around private tutoring. There is anecdotal evidence that teachers of the curriculum will issue letters to students at the start of a term of study, and that letter will set out terms by which private tutoring fees are encompassed. This causes a greater amount of social disparity because it's the richer parents who will obviously pay for that teacher to tutor their students, their children privately. That tutoring is focused on ensuring that student has the best chance of remembering the course content. So what's the current situation and where are we moving to? We're moving from a single assessment per subject sat at the end of grade 12 to 2 assessments per subject in each of grades 10, 11 and 12. We're moving from a test that rewards memory alone to measures and gives credit for a range of cognitive skills being displayed. We're moving from a closed book to an open book assessment experience. We're moving from paper and pen to tablet devices with keyboard and stylus entry. We're moving from a series-based or session-based paper delivery to a model that is supported by an item bank. And we're moving from government-mandated thresholds through the use of psychometric measures to an equating model using a new approach to standard setting. Okay, so the challenges that we've seen in the project development to date. So one of my motivations for giving this presentation does come from Matt, our chair of the EAA. And I was in the audience at the 17th e-assessment question conference last year, and our chair presented a couple of slides around this. During that introduction, Matt had mentioned the notion of piloting and how many of us in the community are used to piloting at a smaller scale to see, to judge the viability of something and then rolling out in a grander scale. And I want to add some context around that. In Egypt, when piloting was first mooted, the Minister of Education, Dr. Tariq, received thousands and thousands of comments and calls and contact from families of students saying that he must try and limit the disruption that students would face, and he must ensure that every candidate has an opportunity. And by rolling out pilots to various governorates, which are districts within the Egyptian country, that he would be disadvantaging certain elements of the cohort. In the interest of fairness, the minister did roll out a pilot. And so in March 2019, we piloted for the entire country. We had 1.5 million tests sat in 2 weeks. This was the reaction. Colleagues will understand why we undertake piloting. It's to assess the viability of the processes and the systems that you want to release at a larger scale. But of course, news reports, it failed at its first exam. There are a variety of reasons to that, and it's the basis upon which piloting takes place. So there was a very quick public reaction, both covered in the media and covered at the sort of local level by families and within schools. So there's a thing around public perception and reaction to which the minister had to react. One of the things around that, and this links to the security around the tests, is that the platform was designed at that time to accommodate up to 600,000 students. Over 2 million people visited that electronic platform during its first period of launch. We know that there were numerous cyber attacks on the system, and I'm going to just provide a bit of conjecture around that. Coming back to this notion of private tuition and the economy that's related there. We know that teachers in state schools, there is a perception around low status of that job role. Teachers will try to supplement their income through private tutoring, and thus, if you were to remove that sort of income from those teachers that undertake that extracurricular activity, then you might understand why certain teachers, and we know this, certain teachers were encouraging students not to take the exams, not to log on. They were also sharing access passwords around communities to ensure that the system was overloaded by login attempts. So you'll start to understand the very highly political country and situation and the environment within which these tests were offered. And of course, remember, we're still piloting at this stage. This is what's going on in the media coverage. Around that, it's still only G12 that counts towards your university entrance. So the pilot was launched related to grade 10 examinations. So they didn't contribute, but this was the reaction that was launched. We had a political environment where senior personnel within government who were involved in the current paper-based delivery of Thanaway Ahmar the grade 12 exam, were not allowed to be part of the on-screen development project because of fears that they might try and sabotage that attempt. So you'll get to grips of this context. Other challenges we faced were around academic and academic partners. Working with the NCEEE, those colleagues were very, very learned in assessment and in learning and pedagogy. And so it was about building relationships between Pearson and them in order to ensure that we were delivering what the Minister wanted. They're vastly experienced in delivering exam materials on paper, less so on screen. So through the provision of support and training, we've upskilled them and brought them on a journey to allow them to be self-sufficient in due course around the population of the item bank and the test administrations and things of that nature. We were working with multiple subject leaders within the NCEEE, all covering specific disciplines, certain subject expertise. And those of you will know that very few subjects will agree, and therefore there was always a variation in the feedback that we got from the subject leads. And we had to accommodate and work with them in order to ensure that subjects in each test were developed. And finally, the technology, the in-country infrastructure. In 2018, Egypt was ranked 170th out of 200 for internet connectivity. If you place that into context, we're trying to deliver tests to be delivered via remote devices, using cloud, using Wi-Fi from local servers. That's a huge challenge. And so we've worked with the Ministry of Communications and other ministries within the country to ensure that the infrastructure supports what the Minister wants to deliver. So we developed a system that had integrated modules that talked about the delivery, the creation, marking and reporting. In terms of the revised assessment design, we moved for Thanawaya Amma, the actual assessment, from a test assessing memorization alone to encompass a range of cognitive levels using Bloom as the basis. Integrated into the design were notions of cognitive demand using Webb's depth of knowledge model. We also look to ensure learning outcome coverage through the setup of sampling strategies, and we employed a variety of item types to ensure that the questions elicited the evidence against each of the other drivers that were deployed. So we had our item bank and we worked with the NCEEE subject leads to develop blueprints and test maps, which were the configuration of the rules that would allow for tests to be composed from the mass bank of items that had been written. The item authoring system itself allowed for left to right and right to left authoring capability. Items were authored in English and Arabic. We have test outputs in Arabic, English, French, German, Italian, and Spanish. And in terms of the deployment model, we have two forms, one of which is school-based infrastructure, and one is via the cloud and 4G wireless. It allows for one to be backed up by the other. So if the school infrastructure fails on a certain day, to minimize test disruption, test delivery will instantly be switched over to cloud-based deployment. All of that being transferred to and from the Ministry of Education configured data center. Quite interesting in that we saw certain classrooms, and it's an interesting juxtaposition where you saw candidates using this very advanced testing system, using tablets in quite dilapidated classrooms. As you can see from the pictures at the top, overcrowding was a slight issue in certain cases. And without strict invigilation protocols, the risk of collusion and cheating were quite high. But again, these were all things we discovered through the pilot. The system we use for marking is known as eMark. And the picture at the bottom there is one of the marking standardization sessions that we were hosting, whereby we would give instructions and we would have a translator translate those instructions in order for the senior team to ensure that the marking was done in the proper way using the system. Around results reporting, each candidate receives a report card like this. On this card that you can see, the exemplar, each bar represents a different subject. The arrows represent the national average for a subject, and the dots represent how the candidate performed. All those cards are generated within 1 week of the results being approved, And to date, the analysis and the production of these cards has there's been 2 to 3 weeks after the tests have been sat. So in terms of the outcomes and the summary, for May 2019, we delivered tests in 23 different subjects, and we had 14,000 items developed and entered into the item bank. We connected 2,500 schools, and we had over 500,000 candidates registered for that series. In total, those candidates sat a number of tests across subjects, and there were over 4 million tests sat over that 10 days. In terms of key things that we can pick out, we had 30,000 markers use that system across the country, and peak activity was 13,000 in one day. We also had 4.1 million marks captured in one day, and over 500,000 marks captured in 1 hour. Roll forward a year to the session that we are just coming to the end of now. We're just doing the results analysis. We had 1.1 million candidates sit across grade 10 and 11, and that is sitting tests via tablet concurrently over the same test period. Over the 3-week period, 10.4 million tests, 50 million constructed response items scored, and 25,000 markers employed. One of the advancements that we've rolled out for this May is the provision of a technical report. The Minister of Education, Dr. Tariq, was keen that we provide individualised feedback to the learner once the test had been taken, and so was keen to utilise one of the advantages that e-assessment brings, and many colleagues will be understanding and will utilise these facilities already. The report itself, if you read from right to left, is structured in 3 parts. The first part gives an exemplar output, and it shows candidates how to read off the chart, and it's related to topic coverage. So it gives an indication of how they performed in terms of the number of marks available for a particular topic within the examination. Each chart is then followed by descriptors based on performance, and it gives them study tips on how to improve or how to maintain that performance relative to the facet of the assessment that was being covered. The second page, similar in principle, but talks about question types, again followed by descriptors of performance. The third page here represents an individual subject. So for those 2 elements of the assessment, the student can look at each bar, and that represents each topic in the first half of that page. Shows them how they performed against the national average for each topic, and that performance is reported by grade level, so it's across the entire year. There is then a statement that tells them how they performed against the national average if they have any trouble interpreting the chart. There is a page per subject. Obviously, I can't display that for you, but these reports, in essence, go out with the report card that I showed you previously in order to give the candidate the optimum chance of improving their performance as they progress to a later grade. Now, in terms of a very short summary, and I hope that this presentation has helped provide some context around the challenges that projects like this will face, and if colleagues are considering entering into tender bids or into projects of this type, it might give some food for thought. It's been a challenging but very rewarding project. We're in the 2nd year of a 4-year project, by which time we will hand over, and the Egyptian government and other colleagues will be self-sustaining. We've developed and delivered tests for grades 10 and 11, and the key will come next year because we will have grade 12 being assessed for the first time. Currently, education law states that it is still only grade 12 that contributes to the decision over whether a candidate enters into university or not. We will be looking to change that, and there are machinations in place, so something will be passed through Parliament in order for us to move to the phased or termly test model. Next June, we'll see us deliver tests for grade 10, 11 and 12 inclusive, taking tests at the same time. That will be 1.5 million candidates taking tests concurrently using the infrastructure that's in place. We will continue to develop practice opportunities across all grades. With the grade 12 test in 2021 being offered in June, we will look to deploy in January to allow those candidates a practice opportunity to familiarise themselves with the mechanism, albeit they have been through grades 10 and 11, so they will be accustomed to it, we would hope. But I guess one of the things that I want to talk about is messaging. That is that in terms of the detail that you may wish to share, or the Ministry of Education in a jurisdiction may wish to share, it's about what you provide and when you provide it. That there are times when you can be too transparent. But for those of us that work in jurisdictions where information is often shared with the public, it's about releasing the right sort of information at the right time, at a level of detail public can consume. But ultimately, I want to end by saying that rapid digital innovation is possible if you have a clear vision and you have the drive to succeed. If you can cut through the noise, and quite legitimate noise at times, but if you can stick to your goal, if you can plan successfully and you can find partners and a team that can collaborate with you to deliver, then there really is no limitation to what you might achieve around e-assessment at a national scale. Thank you.
David, thanks very much for that really informative presentation. It's a fascinating project and clearly challenging, as you've mentioned, but clearly also has the potential to be hugely rewarding. And it has, for me, listening to what you were talking about there, has great parallels with some of the challenges that many other countries around the world are facing, not just now, topically with COVID-19, but just in general in terms of transforming their high stakes assessment processes into things that are valid and reliable and resilient. So really, really interesting. Thank you very much for finding the time to join us and share this with us. For people who have questions, this presentation is going to be followed directly by a live Twitter chat, which David is going to be on to answer any questions that you have. So please do put those questions to him using the hashtag shown on the screen at the moment. That's the EAssess20 hashtag. And yeah, do put those questions to David, and I know he'll do his best to answer those. So David, thanks once again for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me. Look forward to speaking to colleagues and seeing other presentations, both in the insight session and the delivery piece come later June. But thank you very much. Cheers, Matt.
So I hope you enjoyed this insight session with David talking about the work that Pearson have been doing in Egypt. There are some other insight sessions coming up in the next couple of weeks, so I thought just to end, it might be worth giving you some details about those. On Thursday, the 11th of June next week at 2 p.m, Luella Morton, co-founder and executive director at TestReach, is going to be talking about the real and perceived barriers to remote invigilation, a very topical subject in the current environment, and understanding the impact of that technology on awarding bodies. Then on Thursday the 18th of June, also at 2 p.m, Anya Cesarica, Strategic Relations Manager from Inspira Assessment, is going to be talking about the impact of the pandemic on student experience around digital exams within higher education. And then, of course, commencing on Tuesday the 23rd of June at 11 a.m, we have the full virtual e-assessment question conference. Full details on these other insight sessions and also how to register for the full conference can be found on the website shown at the bottom of the screen, e-assessment-question.com. So thanks once again for watching this insight session, and don't forget that if you've got questions for David about his presentation, please do join us now on the live Twitter chat using the hashtag EAssess20. Thanks very much again for listening, and I look forward to welcoming you to a future insight session.